We will discuss today as a part of our open conversations the ideological scene in the West, and especially focusing on naturalism, idealism, wokeism which is going on there, and this part, holistic optimum pluralism. This is how I define the new vision that I have for present and near future, holistic optimum pluralism. And this has 5 parts to it, 5 constituents: spiritual pluralism, cultural pluralism, social capitalism, holistic healing, and true democracy. So let us look at what is going on in the West in ideological terms, how naturalism and idealism have been discarded, what are the outcomes of it, and why we need holistic optimum pluralism. If we look at the ideological scene in the West in the historical context, we can divide the Western civilization's history from an ideological standpoint into 3 eras. The first era is the Greek era. The Greek era is the age of reason, the ideology of reason. Then we have the Christian era, where the primary ideology is ideology of faith, theistic ideology of God, and the ideology of Christianity. And then after Enlightenment, we have the secular ideology, which is driven largely by freedom, individualism, and hedonism. And we should be clear that there is no society without ideology, explicit or implicit, accepted or implicitly acted upon. There is always an ideology that informs, governs, or channelizes, gives direction to any society. Coming to modern times, we have ideological constructs like communism, capitalism, environmentalism, feminism, and all of them are essentially based upon not communism, but capitalism and feminism particularly are based upon individualism and hedonism. Communism is not based on individualism. Environmentalism is not necessarily based upon hedonism. At times it can be opposing hedonism. But largely at the center of the Western ideological thinking we find today, largely individualism and hedonism. Another important element in ideological sphere is the element of design, because this is like ab initio background creator. If we accept that there is some design in the universe, some design of our nature, some design of our life, it naturally leads to the point of purpose, and it naturally leads to the limitation of human free will, and it also leads to a format of life. So the question of design is central, and the question of design is not necessarily a theistic question. Some people wrongly believe that if we accept design, we have to accept God. It's not true. There are schools in Hinduism, like Buddhism and Jainism, which are atheistic schools, they believe in design, but there is no creator behind that design apart from creation. There are some theistic schools where God is immanent and not distinct from creation. And therefore, when we talk about design in existence, design in reality, we don't have to believe in God. We don't have to believe in God apart from existence. You can have an atheistic outlook and still believe in design. You can have an atheistic outlook and still believe in the law of karma. You may not believe in the law of karma, may not believe in God, and still may believe in design in the Jungian sense. So you can believe in the idea of design from a theistic point of view, from an atheistic point of view, and even just from a psychological point of view without anything to do with spirituality. So design is central. The moment we accept design in reality, it puts a limitation on free will and it puts a purpose behind us because the purpose comes jumping out of design. And then we don't see reality as a blank canvas on which we can paint anything. There is a purpose, there is a structure, and we have to abide by it. And therefore, we cannot have omnipotence of our free will. We may still have primacy of free will, but we don't have omnipotence of free will. And the design, by and large, is not limited only to the human mind or human body. If we find design, then we find design beyond human beings in nature also, and that takes us to what is natural or naturalism. And naturalism then takes us very close to evolutionary theory. It also takes us closer to the real is rational, and couple that with the point is to change it, a synthesis between the two. But we cannot wish away the real and rational and reduce it to zero. So the question of design is central to all ideologies. And today in the West, we have ideological situation where there is no acceptance of design. They believe there is no design. Western ideological orientation today says there seems to be no design and therefore the free will is omnipotent, and if not omnipotent, it is substantially primal, substantial primacy, and there is no naturalism. The moment you say there is some naturalism, except naturalism, feminism, half of that will crumble. Feminism stands on rejection of naturalism. Feminism stands on rejection of the argument of design. Feminism stands on the primacy of free will to paint whatever it wants on a blank canvas. So today what we see in the West is an ideology which is based upon individualism, hedonism, feminism, and free will omnipotence. Although they don't use the word omnipotence, they hide it behind the word primacy or substantial agency. But in the heart of their heart, what they act out from, unconsciously, we can see the omnipotence at work. And this ideological belief of the West, which has been going on ever since the Second World War by and large, today has graduated into a wokeism. And this is actually a very intense and deep distortion of even an otherwise flawed and unsustainable ideology. Therefore, we are dealing with the worst today, the worst of the free world in ideological context. Now this entire thinking is essentially a Brahmanical in its ideology. If we look at all the isms, capitalism, communism, environmentalism, feminism, individualism, hedonism, all these isms of the West essentially are Abrahamical in their foundation. And the Abrahamical thinking rests upon singularism. The true foundation of all Western thought is singularism. And the true foundation of all Eastern thought is pluralism. Singularism means there is one truth. I know that truth. If you don't believe in that truth, it is my duty to convert you to my truth. And if you don't, then it is my duty to use lure or force to convert you to my truth and establish what I believe is the absolute truth as the only truth in the world. This is the edifice of singularism. The edifice of pluralism says freedom to believe or not to believe, and if to believe, any way I wish to believe. This is the foundation of pluralism. Entire Western thinking is based on the foundation of singularism. Entire Eastern thinking is based on the foundation of pluralism. It is a tragedy if any school of the East we see moving from foundation of pluralism to singularism. And the singularism tragedy is that singularism is a guaranteed route to crusade. It's a guaranteed route to conflict. And therefore we see that every edifice of singularism ultimately branches out into schools, and the schools fight between themselves. Just take a look at Christianity, how many churches fight with each other within Christianity. And look at Islam, how many schools in Islam fight with each other. Every school in Islam calls every other schools as kafir. And if you put all the fatwas together, no Islamic school will remain Islamic, they will all become kafirs. So conflict is inbuilt in the foundation of singularism. Just a question of time till we come to blows. And therefore, there is no way out for the world but pluralism, especially once we have weapons of mass destruction at our disposal. And therefore, there is a global need, a global imperative to establish the ideology of pluralism and overcome singularism in all its forms. That is the only way we can save the world and make it better. And that is the only way we can disentangle the world from the clutches of singularism into which it has unfortunately been for the last at least 1000 to 1500 years. I would say 2000 years, not only 2000 years, I would say even the West has been in the grip of singularism ever since we know of documented ideologies being there. In the East, we never had the problem of singularism. We had rigidity coming in schools at local levels, but never at a civilizational level. So the question now is, at present, there is a global battle going on in ideological terms between singularism and pluralism. And it is our duty, or it should be our duty, to fight from the side of pluralism and establish pluralism overturning singularism. Why has this ideology that is in currency in the West come to acquire such a center stage? What are the foundations of its power? How did it come to establish itself, and how does it sustain itself? The power foundation of the current Western ideology essentially is rooted in something very flimsy. It's not a profound philosophical foundation. It's more like a confederation of a few frustrated intellectual groups. So the first foundation, unfortunately, is it is the college campus wisdom overtaking Western countries, which is very juvenile. Usually people used to take college campus wisdom in social sciences with a pinch of salt. University wisdom in empirical physical sciences is one thing, and university wisdom in social sciences is quite another thing. No harm in accepting university wisdom in pure sciences, but it is stupid to accept university wisdom in social sciences when we know how difficult research is and how limited the outcomes of research are in social sciences. So unfortunately, what has happened is somehow in the Western societies, the confidence of people in practice has gone away, or the shouting capacity of people in practice has gone away, and the media and academia has been hijacked by those ideologues who are strong on the college campus in political terms. And they expound stupidity as wisdom, and they suffer from what I call the BA, MA, PhD syndrome. People who have never got out of the campus and done something in real life and yet try to act wise. So this is a syndrome we have to beware of and never allow people of this category to really have a say in policy making. Unfortunately, somehow the population of the Western countries is now behaving more like junior college students, and they are succumbing to the category who is suffering from this BA, MA, PhD syndrome. And the college campus wisdom has become the public discourse. And professionals from practice don't have the voice or the intellectual dexterity to really articulate and oppose this college campus wisdom, which in the heart of their hearts they know is stupid, trying to pass itself off as real life wisdom. This is one very important and unfortunate development in the Western countries, which is a pillar of the power of the current ideological structure. Second is the rule of crackpots. These crackpots who are suffering from this BA, MA, PhD syndrome in colleges and their cohorts in media and in politics, they are the one, this gang of crackpots is ruling. And two good examples are Canada and New Zealand. Both Canada and New Zealand have a crackpot each ruling them, and they are democratically elected, unfortunately, which tells us to what depths the society of Canada and New Zealand have fallen to. There is no voice of professionals who know the real world. It's the theoreticians who are calling the shots. Second, it is the rule of the lesbian and bisexual women and the networks that they control, which people don't even know about. It is these groups. Take for example USA. The vice president of USA is nothing more than a collaborator, I would say, of this very group. She has been put forward by this very group, a very powerful group where Hillary Clinton has a very strong say. So this group is one group which is ruling in a substantial way Western countries. And this group knows how to use two very important tools. One is woman's body and second is the instrument of sexual harassment. And they use this to blackmail people, to control people, to seduce people and rule in an indirect way because they know they can't rule coming out in the open and winning election. So it is hijacking of democracy from behind. Second is the rule of votes, and unfortunately they come out in the open and get votes. You have one woke ruling Canada, another woke ruling New Zealand, and it is these wokes who are nurtured by these crackpots in the colleges and who now are taking over to rule. And obviously they cannot come on their own. They are supported by big agencies like CIA or corporate bodies. At times by the Chinese Communist Party. At times by the global jihadi network funded by Arab money. And it is this global network of homosexuals, bisexual groups, which is a second invokes the second foundation of the power structure of the ideology in the Western countries at present. The third pillar of power is the guilt of the majority. Guilt has been put into the majority on the count of race, on the count of exploitation of women, on the count of environmentalism, on the count of privilege, on the count of lack of development in Islamic and African societies. And this guilt has been put so much that the majority now is denaturalized, then demasculinized, and despiritualized. Because unless you do these three, you cannot establish a woke rule. You can establish a homo-lesbo rule or a woke rule, which is what at present the ideological rule in the Western countries is. The essential rule in the Western countries in ideological terms today is a homo-lesbo rule and a woke rule. And this cannot be established unless the majority is first despiritualized. Once you are despiritualized, it's easy to denaturalize. And once you are denaturalized, you don't say anything is natural. You don't say being a man, my masculinity is natural. You don't say differences among people are natural. You don't say people are differently endowed and therefore high-end innovation does not occur to everybody. You cannot say men and women are different. You cannot say there are different national cultures and there are functional and dysfunctional national cultures. You cannot say there is something called cultural capital and there are natural cultures. You cannot say there is a natural evolution of cultures. You cannot say there is a natural archetypal endowment inside, and if you don't connect to it, you feel rootless, traditionless. So you are denaturalized to wipe clean the canvas, to create a blank canvas. So first you are despiritualized by attack on spirituality in the name of so-called half science. Then you are denaturalized by using the flawed researches of behavioralism and pouncing upon anybody who talks about naturalism by calling them Lamarckian, by calling them racial, by calling them those who will lead to the final solution, by calling them patriarchal. So you denaturalize them by these attacks. And then you demasculinize them. You attack masculinity itself. But you attack masculinity only in men, not in women. So you attack masculinity in men and you attack femininity in women. You don't attack femininity in men and masculinity in women. And this demasculinizes you. Once these three are done and the guilt has gone so deep that you allow all of it to happen, you just don't oppose it. And if you try to oppose, you are thrown out of the university. You are not given media space. You are attacked. You are professionally annihilated. So once you allow this to happen, then you submit in a masochistic fashion. There is what comes into existence is a masochistic submission of a child to a tyrannical mother. And this is where the Western population is today. A majority of Western population is in this psychoanalytic state. A helpless child masochistically submitting to a tyrannical mother. And the fourth, this is the third pillar of power of the ideological structure in the West today. The fourth pillar is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping starts from the education. First, you indoctrinate people into wokeism. You indoctrinate people into denaturalization, demasculinization, despiritualization, into a masochistic submission to that homo lesbo feminist gang. So first you indoctrinate people in schools and colleges. As the students come in, they are completely impressionable and blank screens. Then you give higher marks or higher grades in evaluation to those who conform to what you say. So it drills it deeper that this is the only right thing, or even if it is not, you have to pretend that you believe. Then it comes to faculty selection. You don't select anybody who has pro-right views. You select only pro-left views. Faculty selection do you do in order to create a leftist gang, a wokist gang. And this is where a commission is needed in the West to go into every university's faculty selection, teaching, evaluation, and research publication to ensure an ideological balance and to punish ideological persecution, ideological harassment. We need a Rights Justice Commission to go into last 50 years of academic working and punish those who have punished innocent people who believe in right-wing opinions. Then once you get selected as a faculty, survival is at stake. If you shout too loud, you won't get any promotion, you won't get any conferences to attend, you won't get good subjects to teach, and worst come worst, you will be involved in a false sexual harassment case and thrown out. Or students will be incited against you, especially the homo lesbo students who are anyway in their groups, to complain against you for not teaching well or something, and you will be thrown out. And then there is a gatekeeping in research publication, that the editorial boards and the people to whom the papers are referred to, they all belong to this gang, the homo lesbo woke gang, the lefto jihadi gang. And so research does not get published, and this creates a citation loop. When in research publication you don't have ideological balance, then it creates a false citation loop where if you want to quote any person who is published, everybody is on the left. And therefore, it creates a citation loop, a false citation loop. X quotes Y, Y quotes Z, and Z quotes X. It's a false citation loop. And therefore, this whole business of quoting past research to build new research is a flawed exercise, because the past research is actually a false research. It's only one-sided research. And much of it was published only on ideological basis, not on merit. And then there is a gatekeeping in funding. You fund researches only which are conducive to your ideology. There is a joke in research which says the outcome of research depends on who commissions the research. And this is also at work here. And brilliant ideas on the right just die unfunded. So these are some of the pillars which are at present upholding the power of the ideological construct in the West. The fifth pillar of power is the false representation. The difference here is man is not a man representing a man. If you look at man and women in discourse in ideological terms, the argument made is that men themselves want feminism of the type women want. And who are these men and women? They are not true representatives of the universe of men or the universe of women. And for that, we have to go into the ideas of masculinity and femininity. Somebody can be biologically a man, but have low masculinity and high femininity, in which case he is not a representative of men in general. Similarly, you can have a biological woman with high masculinity and low femininity, and therefore that woman is not really a representative of women in general. And by this false representation, they create this facade of having created policy with due representation, which is never there. In fact, men should be represented by men with high masculinity and women should be represented by women with high femininity. And then let us see what that committee has to say. So by false representation, you create false reports, false statements, false conclusion, and pass it off as something which has been arrived at after universal inclusion. It is completely false. It is this fallacy of false representation. So this is one tool used to anchor the ideology, one tool of the power of the current ideology in the West. Fifth tool. Sixth tool is sciences which don't conform to your worldview and your opinion and your conclusions, throw them out of the window. Don't bring findings in those sciences into discussion at all. Just pounce upon them, attack them, do an intellectual mob lynching on social media, on Twitter, wherever you can find, media particularly, and don't allow researches which talk about design in reality, which talk about naturalism, which talk about wisdom of tradition, which talk about spirituality, which go against singularism, which go against Abrahamical thinking, which go against feminism, jihadism, or wokeism. Throw them out of the window. Just don't bring them in discussion. And here we have psychoanalysis, anthropology. Religion, evolutionary sciences which talk about naturalism, and spirituality. Throw all of them out of the window because these sciences are not convenient to your distorted point of view. Don't talk about freedom of this freedom. Don't talk about freedom from desire. Talk only about freedom of desire. Because freedom from desire will bring in spirituality. And spirituality will not conform to your wokist or your homo lesbo vision or your feminist vision. So talk about freedom of desire. Don't talk about freedom from desire. And this has corporate sanction because freedom of desire means corporate profits. Freedom from desire means corporate losses. corporates have vested interest in stifling spirituality and keeping it out of discussion. Because spirituality will never increase corporate profit, it will always reduce corporate profit. Spirituality will talk about freedom from desire, not freedom of desire. And what these Western ideologues want today is that the society traditionally as it exists should get destroyed and it should be substituted by a corporatized society where functions of the family are done by corporates, educational functions are done by corporates, health and security functions are done by corporates. The whole society is corporatized, and that corporate structure at the top is governed by these homo, lesbo and woke gangs. So this is one more pillar of their power. And then there is no honest discourse. There is discourse of rights, no discourse of duties. Just as this discourse of desire, no discourse of freedom from desire. So all this, and last and very important, if despite all this somebody speaks up, pounds and silence, intellectual mob lynching of all contrary opinion. These are, if we look here, these 4 and this 5, these 9 are the major elements on which these are pillars of power of the homo, lesbo, woke gangs, ideological groups in the West, which are governing the entire Western civilization today in ideological terms. Obviously, if you have to overthrow them, you have to crash all these pillars. Now, what does it do? What are the outcomes of what is happening? Outcomes are very, very disturbing, and that is why we have to fight them. It has led to creation, it has actually contaminated science and led to emergence of what is called ideological science. Science is supposed to be free from all biases, all ideological preferences. Science should never be ideological in the first place. Unfortunately, the free science has been killed. It has been substituted by an ideological science. And this has gone on to such deep levels that many professors from both universities have started a movement to resign en masse and create a new university where free science again is possible. And this has led to a movement which is a double-edged sword called people's science. Take for example naturopathy. Take for example homeopathy. These sciences give benefits to millions of people and people believe in it, but the current ideological establishment just does not want to research these sciences, and therefore people are researching them at very amateur levels with whatever they have, and they are propagating it at their level. And obviously when you do this, the science develops, but it is with some risks because you cannot go into niceties without funding and instruments. So a people's science is developing as a revolutionary protest against this ideological science. And this entire thing has to go, and free science has to be re-established. But this unfortunate situation, one outcome of this. Second casualty is sustainability. Because all these isms which are in vogue are unsustainable. Without a family structure, the young population to replace the old and aging and dying population is just not there. And countries have to import people, import immigrants. And they are importing immigrants from societies which are based on the sustainable family structure. If the entire world converts into this unsustainable wokeism, where from will any country import anybody? And this lack of sustainability has not come about in 500 years. It has come about just in 50 years. 50 years of this individualism, feminism, hedonism, and wokeism in the West. And the West today is declining in population terms. It cannot sustain itself without immigration. And if you say no to immigration, you become like Japan. Old man society where nobody wants to spend because everybody is in a saving mode, regardless of what you do. Even if you bring interest rates not only to zero but -2%, people still don't spend because an old man is not expected to spend. It's just unnatural. All that an old man will do will to save for future and his medical costs. And unless you have adequate number of young in the society, the economy won't develop, the country can't defend itself, human race cannot go on. It's fundamentally an unsustainable situation. The pension from the old has to come from the taxes of the young. Old cannot work. It's a fundamentally unsustainable situation. This is where the current Western ideology leads to. This does not mean we go to the other extreme and say family system should be the only system. My opinion is there should be a cultural pluralism and family system should be the mainstay of multiple formats of living. Another casualty is right to being natural is at stake. You cannot be natural. You cannot assert your masculinity. You cannot assert your spirituality. You cannot assert your religion. Everything is being attacked. You cannot exert your right to capitalism if you believe so. Holistic healing is at stake because you attack anything that even distantly seems connecting to spirituality, and you become an indirect supporter of allopathy and the pharma lobby. And there is a gang rule at universities and the media. There is nothing, it is like an Italian mafia with an intellectual flavor. And what governs organizations is this homo lesbo network. So what happens in this homo lesbo network that governs who is going to get promoted, who is going to stay or lose the job. It is not merit. So merit becomes a casualty. And we can see this in many organizations where merit has gone out of the window because this homo lesbo woke network, I should call it HLW network, homo lesbo woke network, has taken over those organizations. Most importantly, freedom is at stake. Political freedom, religious freedom, spiritual freedom, personal freedom, intellectual freedom. Freedom in all its forms is at stake because this homo lesbo woke network that is ruling today is a totalitarian network, and it is in hand in gloves. It's standing together with communists and jihadis who are equally totalitarian. So freedom is under attack from totalitarian actors, the homo lesbo woke network and communists and jihadis, all the three together. That's what creates an imperative to fight this totalitarian network of homo lesbo woke groups, communist groups and jihadi groups. They are one today. It is the axis of evil. And this evil empire is spread across the world, and that has to be overthrown. The evil empire is not my phrase, it's Reagan's phrase. I often use this phrase, left of Lenin, right of Reagan, when I talk of pluralism, to bring good ideas into one from different sources. So then we come to the central question, what to do. If this is what is governing the ideological scene in the West, and these are the outcomes of that, what to do? to save freedom and to save the goodness in the world. We have to re-establish first pluralism, defeat singularism, establish pluralism all over the world in all its forms. And here pluralism refers to spiritual pluralism, freedom to believe what you wish to believe, and first freedom to believe or not to believe, if to believe any way you wish to believe. Cultural pluralism, where there are multiple formats of living. One format is the family format, but there are many other formats of living. Social capitalism, where capitalism is tamed by a social conscience. And how to do it, I have discussed it in some other lectures. Holistic healing, I have also discussed in some other lectures. And true democracy. Today what you have is a sham democracy. How to establish it, details I have discussed in some other lectures. First, establish pluralism, and the best way of establishing pluralism is to spread Hinduism. So only ism which is essentially equal to pluralism in all its forms. Then establish, I mean not establish, but allow naturalism to grow in a natural way. Allow psychoanalysis, anthropology, and spirituality to again come to the center stage. Establish a, okay, go in for sustainability analysis of culture, economy, political systems, society. Sustainability should be seen over a 500-year period for whatever model we choose in any area of life, be it economics, politics, religion, spirituality. I have dealt with in a lecture on sustainability in details. We have to appoint a commission to sanitize education, law, and media, purge the whole system of this gang, this mafia, and throw them out of the system, remove them from the jobs, and induce an ideological balance in the system, in the curriculum, in the evaluation systems, and all the gatekeeping. At every level, there has to be an ideological balance. We have to make sure that affirmative action abides by the two fundamental principles of affirmative action. The two fundamental principles are affirmative action should not create new victims, and affirmative action is for redressal, not for revenge. Affirmative action today has gone over the board, and at times it creates new victims, at times it gets the flavor of, partakes the flavor of revenge. So we have to make sure affirmative action abides by the two fundamental principles of affirmative action, that affirmative action is not to create new victims, and it is for redressal, not for revenge. And we have to get into discourse what is ideal for the society to do, what is natural, and if the natural is not ideal, how to move towards the ideal, at what speed and in what measure, and how to include diversity and inclusiveness in this ideal. And one way to do it is to have a vision of what I call HOP, holistic optimum pluralism. And this has 5 pillars. This is the philosophy that I propound. Holistic optimum pluralism for the current world, for the current times, contemporary times. It has 5 pillars. It is a vision, and a program answers the question what to do in practice. and it talks about optimizing pluralism in a holistic way. Spiritual pluralism in the area of spirituality and religion at the core, cultural pluralism in the context of social organization, social capitalism, holistic healing, and true democracy. So with this, we can set right, not only destroy the present evil, but establish a good order with this philosophy, a pluralistic philosophy, with philosophy of pluralism, and under that broad philosophy of pluralism, a vision of holistic optimum pluralism. And this vision has 5 pillars, and details of all the 5 I have discussed in different lectures. If anyone is interested in detailing this out, it can be done, easily be done, to create a global vision. And this vision can be implemented or advocated initially by what I believe should be a global freedom group. There should be a global freedom group based upon pluralism and holistic optimum pluralism as its program. And in that program, there should be detailing out of these 5. And globally, the global freedom group should fight for defense of freedom and removing this evil that has gripped the world. Not to be paranoid, not to go into a paranoid schizoid position, but to call evil when the evil is evil, recognize what we are fighting, how well networked it is, how resourceful it is, what horrible outcomes it is leading the world to, and those who can see the future can see even more of the horror. Hegel used to say, one of the greatest things in life is to see the present with the eyes of history. Similarly, when we see the future with the eyes of history, we see the horrors of what the present evil can lead the world to. So it's necessary to create a global freedom group with people from every country, an online group and then an offline group, have a agenda of philosophical agenda of pluralism and a vision and a program agenda of holistic optimum pluralism with these 5 elaborated, expanded, and with that establish a better world.